I arrived at the lake without my laptop for the first time in 3 years. This decision seemed madness to me. I always took it with me, even if I was leaving only for a day. My laptop was my weapon, my protection, and my shackles at the same time. When I left the apartment without it, it felt as strange as going out barefoot. But this time I ran away. I ran away from endless presentations, calls, letters, from people in suits who measured my life in percentages and diagrams. I wanted to run even from myself, from the one who could calculate everything down to the second. The lake met me with a dense fog. White, opaque, it swallowed the outlines of the trees and the pier, creating the feeling that I had ended up in a world without borders. The water beat against the wooden piles and boats, creating a rhythm that, for some reason, calmed me. I inhaled, and for the first time in a long while I felt that my lungs were truly filled with air. I stood on the edge when I heard a voice. "Do you want to go on the water?" It sounded unexpectedly, but not harsh. I turned and saw a man. He stood as if he himself was a part of this landscape, tall, with tan skin and dark eyes, calm as depth. His movements had no hurry, and this confused me. I was always running somewhere, but he seemed to live in another dimension. "I want to go where there are no meetings," I replied, not even knowing why. He smiled faintly, but in that smile I felt irony and kindness at the same time. "Then you are lucky," he said, and stepped toward the boat. I hesitated for a few seconds, but then stepped after him. The boat swayed, and I felt that I was taking the first step into a new, dangerous, and unfamiliar story. The boat slid across the water, and I felt my heart beating in rhythm with the waves. He sat opposite me, his hands confidently working with the oars, but the movements were unhurried, calm, as if he enjoyed the very sensation of this rhythm. I caught myself thinking that I was staring at his fingers for too long. They were strong, but not rough. "I'm Eliza," I finally said, to break this strange silence. "I know," he replied so confidently that I almost laughed. "You walk fast. Like a person who is afraid of being caught up." I lowered my gaze. "I am always chased by deadlines," I sighed. He threw his head back and laughed, short, but sincere. "Today they won't be able to. Today you are in the fog." I felt something thaw inside me. His laughter was warmer than any blanket and coffee. We sailed in the middle of the white milk that hid the whole world from us. My fingers touched the side, and a wave rocked the boat so that my knee met his thigh. I felt this touch with my whole body. He leaned a little closer and took my hand, without asking. "Hold," he said, and covered my fingers with his palm. I didn't pull my hand back. I looked at his profile, and for the first time in a long while, I wanted time not to move forward. We landed on the other shore. There stood a small hut, old, wooden, but tidy. Dim light streamed from the little window, and inside there was warmth and the smell of tea. "It's quiet here," I said when I crossed the threshold. "Here they listen," he corrected. And I felt how this word responded somewhere deep inside. In the room stood a wooden table, next to it, a burner with a teapot, and above us hung a lantern that cast warm reflections on the walls. "And your investors?" he suddenly asked. I smiled bitterly. "They are waiting for me tomorrow. But I want tomorrow not to come." He looked at me so attentively that I suddenly felt, he sees me, the real me. Not the one who is always strong, in jackets, with presentations and numbers. But the one who hides a tired soul behind a smile. He didn't touch me, and this only inflamed the desire stronger. I walked to the wall, leaned on it, and loosened my hair. "Look," he pointed at the window. The fog had dispersed, opening the lake, which shone like polished skin. "Beauty is when it is easier to breathe," I said. "And when you want to be closer," he replied. I took a step. He made half a step. Our breaths met in the middle. His fingers touched the edge of my jacket. One button came undone, then another. I closed my eyes, feeling my heart beat faster than ever during my speeches in front of hundreds of people. His lips touched mine, carefully, as if he was afraid of breaking me. I responded, and the kiss became deeper, stronger. The lantern above us swayed from our breath. I felt the taste of his mouth, slightly salty, slightly bitter, like the night after a storm. I was no longer a startup founder. I was a woman who allowed herself to fall into feeling. We sat on the floor, listening to the rain knocking on the roof. His hand slid over my thigh, and I shuddered from the wave of heat. He leaned closer, and his fingers touched my skin under the thin fabric. Our bodies pressed together, and every movement became a new confession. We were losing control, and it was the only thing I wanted. When our breathing finally evened out, I saw the phone flashing on the floor. Message: investors were waiting for me tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I hid the screen under my jacket, but he had already seen. You will run away from me tomorrow just as you ran away from your world. His voice was muffled and low. I don't know, I said honestly. His eyes flared with jealousy, and he sharply pulled away. It hurt me more than any words. You belong to them. You are created for money and numbers, he threw. I belong only to myself, I answered and took a step toward him. But he stepped back. Silence hung in the room, in which I felt something dangerous had already been born between us. It smelled of rain, the lake, and jealousy. It beat in my chest, forcing me to forget everything I knew about logic. And maybe that was real life. Morning met me with the smell of coffee. I woke to sunlight seeping through the narrow cabin window and the bittersweet aroma of freshly brewed drink in the air. Grayson sat at the table, pouring black liquid into metal mugs. He cast me a quick glance, as if checking whether I was really there or whether it had all been a dream. I sat, hugged my knees with my hands, and watched him in silence. He handed me a mug. Our fingers touched, and I felt that same electric current from yesterday. I took a sip. The hot bitterness burned my tongue but at the same time pulled me fully back into life. We went out to the dock. The sun had climbed higher, the fog was thinning, yet inside me the residue of our night still sat heavy. I wanted to ask about his jealousy, about his abruptness, but words lodged in my throat. We sat without speaking. He drank coffee in small sips while I watched light glint in his eyes, and in those eyes I saw fear, not anger or reproach but fear that I would disappear, that I would slip back into my world of laptops and numbers. I feared it too. That evening we went back onto the lake. The water lay as smooth as glass and the boat slid almost soundlessly. I watched him row, the profile of his face caught by the setting sun, and thought, there has never been such a man in my life. He demanded nothing, proved nothing, he simply was, and that was enough. We stopped in the middle of the lake. He put the oars aside and the boat rocked gently on the small waves. Grayson leaned toward me and kissed me. This time the kiss was not tentative, it was deep and passionate, one that made me lose all sense of my body. His hand touched my shoulder, then slid down to wrap around my waist, pulling me closer. I felt his breath hot and hurried, and in that moment I wanted only to disappear into him. The boat lurched more strongly but we did not let go of each other. My heart pounded in my chest and I could not tell whether it was mine or his. His fingers moved across my thighs and each touch made me tremble. I gripped his shoulders as if afraid he would dissolve into the fog like a vision. Our lips met again and again. In that instant there was no world besides us and the water that rocked us in its rhythm. When we returned to the hut he no longer restrained himself. I felt his body, his desire, strength and tenderness at once. We melted in the trembling lantern light, my nails dug into his shoulders, he held me as if afraid to lose me. I whispered his name and for once forgot that tomorrow existed. I woke because sunlight pressed through the slats of the window. He still slept beside me and I watched his face for a long time. It was open, calm, almost boyish. Yet I knew behind that calm were jealousies, fears, and something I could not yet name. I touched his shoulder and he opened his eyes, smiling, but in that smile there was a shadow. I wanted to tell him I would stay, that I would not leave, but the words stuck. Instead I brushed my hand across his cheek and he kissed my palm. We went out to the shore, thinking the day would be quiet, but she was waiting there. Emma. Tall, blonde, wearing a short dress that seemed a deliberate provocation. Her eyes scanned me as one might scan an obstacle to be removed. Grayson froze as if struck against an invisible wall. "Emma," he said, his voice thin and strained. My heart dropped. "Who is she?" I asked sharply. "An old friend," he answered, but his tone lacked conviction. Her look was possessive, her touch on his shoulder too confident. A blade of jealousy cut me deeply. I turned and walked away, but he caught up with me and grabbed my hand. "Eliza, it's not what you think," he whispered. "And what should I think?" I cried. The fog between us was no longer the comforting kind, it became a fog of suspicion and hurt. We argued until nightfall. I shouted, he remained silent. I cried and he clenched his jaw so hard the veins stood out on his temples. Only the water under the hut listened and echoed our voices. At a certain point I felt I would break if one more minute passed. Then he suddenly pressed me to him. His hands were rough, his movements sharp, the kiss hurt. I pushed him away, then immediately sank into his mouth again with the same desperate hunger. We fell onto the bed and our bodies collided like two waves in a storm. We made love with fury and pain. I bit his lips, he gripped my thighs until I cried out. There was such jealousy and desperation in it that I lost myself and, at the same time, found something real. In that violent intimacy there was more truth than in 100 interviews and deals. When we finally collapsed exhausted, he lay with his hand on my belly, heavy and warm. I listened to his breath and thought, I have never been so alive and so broken at the same time. At dawn I woke to find him sitting by the window, his back tense, his gaze turned far away. I got up, pulled a blanket around my shoulders and approached. "You didn't sleep?" I asked. He paused, then said, "I don't want to lose you." His voice carried so much honesty that I froze. I sat down beside him and laid my head on his shoulder. "Then don't push me away," I whispered. He sighed and took my hands, placing them on his chest. His heart beat fast but steady. "I see only you," he said. His words sounded like a vow but were full of fear. I felt he was battling something inside himself, his own shadow, his past. I kissed his shoulder and whispered, "I'm not afraid of your shadows. I'm afraid you won't let me stay." He leaned in and kissed me, not with the wildness of earlier, but gently and long, as if that kiss could heal us both. For a fleeting instant, it seemed to work. But deep inside I knew our storm was only beginning. I woke earlier than him. The sun had not yet climbed high, and the lake lay calm, like a mirror in which the sky was reflected. I watched Grayson and caught myself unable to look away. His face at rest was different than when he spoke or laughed, open, almost vulnerable. Yet I remembered his eyes last night, filled with jealousy and fear. It hurt to think that I could be the cause of his unease. I stepped outside. The wet grass chilled my bare feet, but it cleared my mind. I walked to the water and touched its surface with my fingers. It was cold, sharp, real. Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me. Grayson came up silently, placed his hands on my shoulders. "Why are you out here?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I answered. "Maybe because I'm afraid of being too close and too far at the same time." He pulled me to him, pressing me against his chest, and for a moment I felt safe, as if no Emma, no investors, no past existed. Only the lake, the fog, and his heartbeat under my ear. We swam together that day. The water was cold, biting, but refreshing. I laughed, splashing him, and he chased me through the shallows. For a while it seemed like we were children again, careless and free. We climbed back onto the dock, dripping, breathless, and I hugged him, laughing. For a moment I thought, no shadows, no jealousy remain. But as we approached the cabin, I saw her again. Emma stood by the door, like a ghost. Tall, proud, her short dress clung to her body as if in challenge. Her eyes fixed on me, filled with both anger and something softer I could not name. "Grayson, you can't run from your past," she said. Her voice was steady, as if she knew the end in advance. Grayson froze. My whole body went cold. She looked at me with something close to pity. You think you can hold him? You think he belongs to you? I wanted to scream, but Grayson stepped between us. Emma, leave. His voice was firm, yet a shadow flickered in his eyes. She smiled faintly, turned away, and disappeared into the fog. But her presence lingered in the air, poisoning even our silence. That evening I couldn't sit still. I paced the cabin, while he tried to work on an old oar, sanding it slowly. Tell me the truth, I demanded. Who is she? He remained silent, his jaw tight. My heart pounded. Was she yours? He lifted his head, his eyes dark. Once, he admitted. The word cut into me like a knife. I felt my chest tighten, my breath falter. He put the oar aside and came closer. But it's over. Is it? I snapped. She looks at you as if it isn't. He touched my hand but I pulled away. I was trembling, torn between fury and longing. He grabbed my arms, pulled me close, his breath hot. I'm with you, he whispered hoarsely. His lips crashed onto mine. The kiss was wild, desperate, a battle and surrender at once. We fell against the wall, tearing at each other's clothes. It wasn't tenderness but hunger, pain, jealousy burning into desire. My nails left marks on his skin, his hands held me so tightly I gasped. We devoured each other, as if trying to erase Emma's shadow with every movement. When we collapsed, exhausted, I knew, we hadn't solved anything. We had only drowned our fear and passion. At dawn I found him again by the window, staring out at the lake. His back was rigid, his hands clenched. I wrapped a blanket around myself and walked to him. You don't sleep? He didn't answer at once. Finally he said, I don't want to hurt you. I froze. You're not hurting me, I whispered. He turned his head, his eyes tired. I'm afraid my jealousy will destroy us. That she will always stand between us, even when she's gone. I stepped closer, touched his shoulder. She won't, unless you let her. My voice shook, but I meant every word. He reached for my hands, placed them against his chest. His heartbeat was strong but uneven. You are my only one, he said. Tears burned my eyes. I kissed him softly, long, trying to heal his fear with my lips. He pulled me into his arms, and for a while we simply breathed together. The morning was pale, the lake quiet, and for a fleeting instant I believed we could truly escape everything. The days blurred. I stopped counting time. We lived between dawn and dusk, between waves and kisses, between jealousy and quiet tenderness. I brewed tea in the cabin, he repaired the boat, and I liked watching his hands. They were confident, strong, and because of that I felt weak and protected at the same time. In the evenings we sat on the dock and said nothing. The water was calm, the air transparent, and for the first time I felt I could breathe without pressure. But one evening she spoiled it again. Emma appeared, carrying a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, smiling poisonously. I thought you wouldn't refuse company, she purred. Rage boiled in me. I walked over, snatched the bottle, and poured the wine onto the ground. If she stays, I leave, I said firmly. Grayson looked at me for a long time, then at her. Go, he said at last. Her smile widened. She leaned toward me, whispering, he always comes back. My chest tightened with fear. But I grabbed him, kissed him in front of her, fiercely. His arms locked around me, his lips burned against mine. And for the first time, I knew, he had chosen me. That night we made love with such madness that I lost my voice. He pressed me against the wall, my nails clawed his back, we bit each other as if we wanted to erase all jealousy and doubts. We fell to the floor, rose again, and fell once more. Our bodies were wild, our hearts pounded like drums. I whispered his name, he squeezed my thighs so hard that marks remained. In this pain there was something sweet, because it belonged to us. It was pain that united. When we finally collapsed exhausted, I lay on him and listened to his breath. He stroked my hair and whispered, "I fear breaking you." "I am already broken without you," I replied. He kissed my forehead, and in that kiss I felt not only passion but also fear of losing me, fear of losing himself. For the first time I realized, we were both hostages of this storm, but neither of us wanted to get out. On the fourth day I no longer knew what day of the week it was. My phone lay somewhere at the bottom of my bag, turned off, and this was the first time in many years. We lived outside of time. The morning began with coffee brewed by Grayson, the day, with the boat on the lake, the evening, with kisses and silence. I watched how he worked with his hands, repairing oars, preparing dinner, and in these simple movements there was more tenderness than in any words. I allowed myself to be weak, and that was the greatest discovery. In the evening he silently took my hand and led me to the dock. We sat together, watching how the fog descended onto the water, how the lights of the lantern reflected on the waves. He didn't speak, and I didn't ask. Our silence was stronger than any conversation. And at that moment I felt, if the world collapsed, I would not regret anything, as long as he was here. But the world always finds a way. When we returned to the cabin, Emma was waiting for us. She stood in the doorway, confident, like the mistress of a house she owned. In her hands was a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "I thought you wouldn't refuse company," she said with the same poisonous smile. Rage burned in me. I walked up, grabbed the bottle, and poured the wine onto the ground. "If she stays, I leave," I said firmly. Grayson looked at me for a long time, then at her. "Go," he said. Her smile only widened. She leaned toward me and whispered, "He always comes back." My heart tightened from those words, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing my fear. I turned to Grayson, pulled him close, and kissed him so that she saw. He responded fiercely, locking his arms around me. Emma's eyes flashed, but she turned away and left. I thought the matter was closed. But the echo of her words remained inside me. That night we loved each other as if the world would end in the morning. His hands were everywhere, my fingers dug into his skin, I bit his lips, he squeezed me so that I moaned from pain and desire. It was madness, in which we both found salvation. In every movement there was struggle, as if we were trying to prove we were stronger than jealousy, stronger than the past, stronger than our own fears. We fell to the floor, rose, and fell again, and all of it resembled a storm that could no longer be stopped. When we finally lay exhausted, I listened to his heartbeat. He pressed me to him and whispered, "I am afraid of breaking you." "Without you I am already broken," I repeated, and his lips found mine again, gentle this time, healing. For once, we were not fury and jealousy, but water and fire, soft and fierce together. In the morning I woke to find him sitting at the pier, staring at the water and smoking. I approached and sat beside him. "Do you regret it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "I'm afraid," he finally said. "Of what?" I whispered. "That you will leave. That your world will take you. That I will stay here alone, and you will forget me." His voice was low, but in it there was more pain than in shouts. I took his hand into mine. "I don't want to go. But I don't know how long I can stay," I admitted honestly. He looked at me long, as if searching for truth in my eyes. "Then promise me you will come back, even if you have to leave," he said. Tears stung my eyes. I nodded. He pulled me into his arms and kissed my hair. And in that kiss there was hope, fragile but real. I had stopped counting days. Time blurred and we lived only by dawns and nights, by waves and breaths, but the world I had run from still found a way to reach me. One afternoon I finally switched my phone on. It had been turned off for days, buried at the bottom of my bag, and when it lit up my chest tightened, messages cascading, partners demanding I come back, warnings that the project would collapse if I stayed away another day. I sat by the fire in the cabin holding the phone like a foreign object, and cold crawled through me. Grayson stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by fog, and his gaze was heavy heavier than any ultimatum from investors. "You will go?" he asked quietly. I couldn't answer. My heart was torn in two, between the world that had shaped me into someone efficient and feared, and this small place where I was simply alive for one person. "I have to finish what I started," I said at last. He turned away and went to the pier. His back was straight, but the tension in his shoulders was visible. The cabin felt suddenly too big and too empty, even with the fire. I ran after him, shouting, "Don't make me choose. I want both you and my path." He didn't turn. For the first time a real wall rose between us, a wall made of responsibilities and fear. Night was the cruelest. We lay on the same bed but with our backs turned to each other. The silence between us cut deeper than any fight. It was filled with unsaid things, assumptions, wounded pride. I wanted to crawl into him, to fix it with a kiss or a promise, but something in me held back, stubborn and proud. Morning arrived, gray and thin, and I packed. My fingers trembled as I folded clothes into my bag. On the table I left a short note: "I will return." Each step on the path away from the hut felt like a betrayal of everything that had happened there, but also like an experiment with courage. He called after me, his footsteps closed the distance. There he stood with the boat key in his hand, tired and beautiful in his exhaustion. "If you go now, you lose us," he said. Those words struck harder than any investor's threat. I fell to my knees and sobbed, the pain raw and absurd. He lifted me gently, forced me to meet his eyes, and said something neither infrastructure nor deadlines could cover: "The choice is not between me and work. The choice is between life and shadow." In that moment his words were clear as water, and I understood that I could not choose the shadow. I stayed. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff into water that might save you or swallow you, but I chose the risk. We sat on the floor of the cabin and for a long while did not speak. Then he leaned forward and kissed me, slow, deliberate, like apology and promise at once. The kiss loosened something brittle inside both of us. We made love gently that night, not out of hunger but from need to rebuild. His hands traced gentle routes on my skin, mapping a future with tender certainty. For the first time I allowed myself to imagine belonging to someone without losing the edges that made me who I was. He whispered against my hair, "You are my only one." The words landed somewhere deep and stayed. Later we went out onto the lake again, under a sky that had no hurry. He took my hands and told me, "If you fall, I will fall too. If you go to the bottom, I will go with you." The confession was both terrifying and glorious. I felt that our bond had crossed some invisible line and had become something that would change the rest of our lives. Emma returned one last time that evening. She appeared at the cabin doorway like a memory that refused to die. Her gaze was cold but with a ghost of something tender that I couldn't parse. She looked not only at him but also at me, sizing us up. "You don't know who you hold," she said softly, a warning or pity or a mixture of both. I stepped forward, kissed him long and deep in front of her, deliberately displaying what she'd tried to unsettle. He answered with equal intensity, and that kiss was our answer. Emma turned and left without another word. Her departure was small and final, the echo of her heels fading away across the pier. We never saw her again after that. The cabin returned to its usual rhythm, the crackle of the fire, the smell of boiled tea, the creak of the oars. For the first time the shadow that had haunted us felt like a story closed. We sat by the fire and he played with my hair, and I felt an honesty between us I had never let myself seek. He touched my chin and said, "We are stronger than that." I wanted to believe him with every part of myself. Time for our little separate world came to an end as subtly as a tide turning. I felt it in my bones, a gentle pressure, a call back to life beyond the trees. One morning I told him plainly, "If you don't come with me, I will stay here forever." His smile was sad and resolute at once. "I will go anywhere, as long as it's with you," he replied. We sat in the boat, pushed off the shore, and the fog wrapped the lake in white. The same fog that had hidden everything when I first arrived, now it felt like a curtain drawn around something intimate and sacred. A wave nudged our boat closer, a tiny shove that felt like fate. I felt his hand warm around mine, steady and sure. We rowed to the far shore together, and when we stepped out I felt strange and whole at the same time. The world beyond waited, with its meetings, deals, and hurried people, but this time I wasn't leaving alone. His grip on my hand felt stronger than any fear. I chose not between an office and a romance, but between life and a pale shadow that would have swallowed us. I chose life.